Let's call to order this evening the Public Safety and Services Delivery Working Group for June 3rd, 2024. Ray, can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Jordan Wittrin.
I'm here.
Jeffrey One.
Here.
Yeah, you sound sick. Carol Allen.
Here.
Victoria, did she get online? Oh,
I did.
Yay. Twyla.
Aaron.
Danny.
Here.
Rich.
Here.
And Ray. Okay.
All here.
Yay.
I appreciate those who are sick, staying at home. Thank you very much.
Thank
Keeping us
you.
all well here. But I also appreciate you attending from home and giving your input and staying up to speed. So thank you.
Everybody, or speak.
Is it this one?
You're gonna mute.
I'm muted.
You're good.
All right. Try it again.
I have no.
I have no idea.
Tanny says he's good. Oh, there we go. We're good now?
Oh, we're good now.
We're good now.
Hey.
All right, so we're gonna move right on. Moving right on to number 2, public comment. So if we have any public comment this evening on any non-agenda items this evening that want to be heard, I don't see anybody in council chambers this evening. Anybody on Zoom wanting to make public comment, please unmute yourself and state your name and your city of residence. And going. And we're going to close public comment for this evening. And we're going to move right on to our consent agenda for our meeting minutes of April 8th, 2024, our regular meeting minutes. And any discussion on the consent agenda or discussion on the meeting minutes? Everything was good? Okay. All in favor of the meeting minutes?
Well, somebody has to
we
move.
need to make a
Oh,
motion.
sorry.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I'm ready to move this thing along. I'll entertain a motion, please.
All right, this is Carol. I make a motion that we accept the minutes of April 8th, 2024.
I'll second that.
All right, we got a motion from Carol and a second from Tanny on the consent agenda for the meeting minutes from April 8th, 2024. Any other further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that consent agenda passes. Moving on, we have Praxis Political Consultants here this evening. And staff, Ray, do you want to do an introduction first?
Well, sure. One of the things that we've talked about in this committee for a while and with council is that one of the options the city is going to likely consider seriously in the future is the way that most cities in the metro area pay for their fire service, which is to have a separate government entity, a fire district, covers the fire protection. And so as part of that process, it would require generally a vote of the people to join, and if you went with Fire District 10, they would have to agree to do it also. So it is something that we don't have a lot of expertise on staff on how to run a bond levy or a ballot measure, and there are several companies in Portland that do this, and I reached out to a number of them, and I give great value to ones who respond to me promptly. One of them didn't get back to me till 3 weeks after I emailed them. Megan got back to me within 48 hours, I think. I don't know if she's desperate, but she was one of the ones I reached out to because in researching, they had a lot of history of dealing with bond levies. They had been involved with Gresham's last years and involved, so they're familiar with the issue of the public safety bond levies. And so I asked them to put together a program for you to walk through step by step what is entailed in pursuing a fire district or creating a new fire district, and what would be the timelines, and what should you look for, how long should it take, what should you be doing, how can you be successful. Just basically it's ballot measure 101 for us to start that process. So with that introduction, Megan and Jake are here this evening to give you a presentation, and feel free to ask questions. I'm sure they're happy to take questions.
Excellent, thank you.
All right.
So we have a PowerPoint that we will run. It has a lot of information, so please feel free to interrupt at any time with questions if things don't make sense. I'm not going to read it all word for word for word, but happy to go over more of anything in detail. So my name is Megan Weaver. I'm one of the partners at Praxis.
I'm Jake Weigler. I'm the other partner at Praxis.
So as Ray mentioned, we're going to go through the process for annexation. And so we're going to talk a bit about all the facts behind that, and then give you some really specific examples. Newburgh did this recently into TBFNR. The Boring Fire District also did it into the Clackamas Fire District. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to create a new district, and McMinnville did that recently. We were fortunate to work with them on that. And then a bit about what that timeline looks like and other areas of outside expertise you might need. So just a little bit more about us. We're a boutique public affairs and communications firm based in Oregon, and both of us come out of campaigns and elections. That's really our background, but in the last couple of years have been applying that more and more to local government work, trying to pass revenue measures. So as I mentioned, we helped create the McMinnville Fire District in 2023. We just helped the Multnomah County Drainage District pass their bond to fund services and capital along the Columbia River. And we're also working with McMinnville, Woodburn, and Tillamook on their revenue measures currently. Do you want to talk a bit about yourself at all?
Yeah, I grew up in Portland. I've been working in Oregon politics for about 20 years. And my big role is supporting Megan, whatever she needs, and make sure we get it done.
Okay, so annexation, in the very short of it, is joining an existing special district. So this is a very specific process. There are 3 ways to do it. The first is an elector petition, the second is board referral, and the third is a city initiates the process. So I'm going to talk through each of these and give you an opportunity to ask questions if you want to. And I think the one thing I'll note, Ray mentioned a lot about ballot measures. This specific process is going to be a lot more complicated than your average ballot measure. In a lot of cases, an entity can just refer a ballot measure, put it on the ballot really easily. It is much more complicated to both annex into a special district or join a special district. So that is all the details you'll learn through this.
And I will be emailing you a copy of this PowerPoint also, so you'll have it for reference. And then I'll have hard copies if anybody wants us to send you a hard copy. So perfect. Just so you know.
Okay, so I know on the table we've been talking about possibly annexing into Fire District 10. So I'll kind of use that as the example when we talk about it. So the first way to join an existing special district is by elector petition. So essentially a group of individuals, this is operating outside city government, a group of individuals get together and file an annexation petition with the county board. So when they file it, it has to have an endorsement of the board they're trying to join. So if you all were to do that, you'd have to have a written endorsement from Fire District 10 that you submit to the county alongside the petition. So this is really interesting, at least this is stuff I think is interesting about the elector petition piece. So it needs to be signed by a lot of people. It needs to be signed by all the owners of all the lands in the territory proposed to be annexed, or a majority of electors registered in the territory. You guys aren't going to be able to do that. What's interesting about this is if you submit an elector petition without all those signatures, it triggers the county to call an election. So to me, this seems like a pretty shortcut way to get an election presented. So that would the county board would then order an election on the same day in both areas. So in the new area you're looking to annex and in Fire District 10. And then if both were to pass, the district board would certify the results and the annexation would move forward. So what's really important to note about this option is that it cannot be done by a government body. It would have to be done by individuals, either public employees not on work time, or people who are not public employees, like city councilors, or perhaps, your local fire union are often a good place to turn for things like this. There's a really long list of things that need to be submitted in that annexation petition. A lot of the work around the mapping and specifics and what it would do all need to be done and submitted to the county. But the good news is that the threshold for signatures for this is really low. You need 100 electors who are registered in the proposed area to be annexed to sign that annexation petition that gets submitted to the county. But again, while that threshold is low for the number of signatures, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get submitted in that petition. And this is an area I think you would need legal guidance ultimately if you wanted to pursue this route. Because I'm just not sure if, the city can fund all of that work, the mapping, all the logistics, and then hand it off to the electors outside. I think that's possible, but I'm not sure. So yeah, this is one area. And then this, as far as what it would look like on the ballot, would be at least 2, but up to 3 ballot measures. So again, Multnomah County would order an election once they received and approved the annexation petition. So there would be 1 measure by county order that included all of the cities that we're looking to annex. And then there would be 1 measure by county order in Fire District 10, asking them, hey, do you want to annex these people in? And then one of the things Ray had mentioned you might do is also put a measure to reduce the tax rate permanently, to kind of align with the money that then is going to...
Don't use the word permanently.
Fair enough.
Reduce your permanent tax authority.
There you go, temporarily.
So that could be another potential measure as well. So in this scenario, there would be 3 ballot measures, I assume all on the ballot at the same time, and that's what that pathway would look like. Okay, the next option is board resolution. There we go. Okay, so this one is the simplest and most straightforward. I believe that Fire District 10 could initiate the annexation by board resolution. I was very excited to learn that. I believe that both a district board or a county board have the authority to initiate an annexation by resolution. It's then filed with the county board. It must include those 3 bullets, which are pretty straightforward, and it must include a resolution from every city that is affected. So if Fire District 10 were to do it, or the county were to do it, it would need to be paired with resolutions from all 3 or 4 cities, as well as the things in those 3 bullet points, and then it would get submitted to the county, and the county would call an election. So that, again, ballot-wise, would look similar to the elector petition option. Multnomah County would call an election, and it would be those same 3 ballot measures. They just might be referred to the ballot by different people. It might be referred by Fire District 10, for example, or by the county. So the third option is the city's initiate option, and this really only is going to get most complicated because you all are talking about 4 cities potentially who would each have to do this individually at the same time. So it gets a bit complicated, but it starts by each city adopting a resolution or a motion to propose annexation to a special district. So you all would propose it. It would go to Fire District 10 to approve or disapprove. And then if the board approved it, it would adopt a resolution to call an election in the district. And then the city would call an election in their own city. So each individual city would have to call an election. You each would have your own ballot measure, and it would be asking that question, do you want to permanently join Fire District 10? And so there are specific dates for when those elections would be held. And if it was approved, then it would be certified and the county board would get those certifications. I don't know, this doesn't say much. Those are the facts, you can read them. So this one, again, is where I think it would get the most complicated. This could result in at least 5, but actually potentially up to 8 ballot measures. So this would have each city, like I said, calling their own election and referring their own measure to the ballot. So you'd have 4 ballot measures there. And then I will say, in Fire District 10, in this scenario, we believe that it could just be 1 ballot question, but we're not sure. That's a place you would need legal guidance, but it's possible that the Fire District 10 voters would have to vote on, do we approve Troutdale? Do we approve Fairview? Do we approve Wood Village? Does that make sense? Okay. So in that scenario, you could have 8 ballot measures. And there's definitely some other pieces about this, I think, that would just lead to a lot of uncertainty. For one, on the city side, you could have a scenario where Gresham, Troutdale, and Wood Village says yes, but Fairview says no, or any of those combinations, which I think would immediately cause issues with your modeling and your feasibility studies. And then on the other hand, with Fire District 10, you could, if you have to have all the different ballot measures, you could have a scenario where Fire District 10 says, sure, Wood Village and Fairview and Troutdale can join, but we don't want Gresham. So all of that would, I think, just lead to a lot of uncertainty and a lot of different processes that have to be run at the same time. The one other thing I want to flag here, and this is way outside my personal area of expertise, but a lot of mapping is involved in this, and a lot of mapping that needs to be aligned perfectly with Department of Revenue and with taxation to make sure that the maps that are being taxed perfectly align with the people who are getting service. And I think it's possible in this scenario, each individual city would have to do their own process, their own mapping for their own taxation models, which would, all go into the same Fire District 10, but in the 2 other scenarios, you would all be able to do that together. You would map the entire area that's going to be annexed in versus having to do 3 or 4 separate processes. So in all cases, in all 3 cases, it's required that the county board holds hearings that happen in specific timelines. They're really pretty low key, but they have to happen. All interested people can appear and talk in support or against it. And then from there, the county determines whether the proposal is consistent with planning and everything like that. And then from the hearing, they then move forward and call an election. And then if it's all approved through the election, then all of that gets submitted to the Secretary of State, Department of Revenue, County Assessor, and County Clerk, and it gets formalized with them that the annexation is final. Are there any questions? Yes, any questions so far?
Have you seen any situations where it becomes problematic because you're creating a new taxing district that's pretty significant, and then you're going to ask, you're going to tell them that you're going to reduce the taxes on the other side, so they're doing 2 separate votes there, right?
Yeah, so I will say, we worked with McMinnville, and they did not do that. They told voters, hey, we're going to pause this tax for a year, but they didn't run a separate ballot measure locking themselves into it. I think that's had a lot of pros and cons. I think that, politically that has led to a lot of issues for them. Now that tax is coming back online and people are saying, hey, I thought you told me I wouldn't have to pay that tax. But no, I think overall that's a big plus for people. I mean, the city is making a commitment that we're not going to double tax you, that, now that you're going to be spending this money over here, we're taking it down over here.
But do you think there's ever any confusion with the voter when they're looking at it?
Well, I think voters can often be confused. Yes, I think that all comes down to kind of the education campaign around it. And I will talk a little bit. So they did that in Newburgh, and there were 6 ballot measures involved in that effort overall. But I do think, ideally you land on a process that makes the ballot as simple as possible. So I think, in that scenario, because it would be each city would decide on their own whether they wanted to do the tax rate reduction, right? So
If I can interrupt, Megan, just on Newburgh for you.
Yeah.
What Newburgh is, they were spending $1.85 a thousand generally in their general fund for the Newburgh Fire Department, and they just couldn't keep a fire department going at that low per thousand rate. And so what they did was initially, they says, we're gonna take that $1.85 out of our permanent tax rate, that was the other ballot measure. So we'll reduce it by $1.85, so it's a straight, your taxes will not go up the first year, but then there would be an increase over, I don't remember how long it was like 20 years or 25 years to come back up again to where they wouldn't have that savings anymore, but it gave them a long time to inch it back in.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, absolutely, anytime there's two ballot measures to vote on, it can cause confusion, but I think it's kind of the best case scenario, telling them you're gonna reduce their taxes, you know, making that commitment to them, or that they're not, at least not gonna double. I don't know if you have anything else to
Yeah,
add.
no, I think that's right, and, you know, you can say, we're handcuffing ourselves as well with this other ballot measure, it's to give you a commitment that we can follow through. And then the other piece that we just heard, from TVFNR was there's a good story to tell here around efficiencies of scale, that both the existing city as well as the existing fire district can say, by bringing more people in, more equipment, you know, we're gonna be able to give you more bang for your buck. And so it actually has kind of that cost and, that pennies philosophy, you could say, like, we're being good stewards of tax dollars by making this transition. But I agree, all that has to be communicated to the voters, they have to understand it. I know that's always a challenging proposition, but that is necessary.
Yeah, I think that's what Fire District told me, Fire District 10, because Fire District 10 is so small now, I mean, like 5,000 people, they're charging the full $2.84 because they need to, but they said, you know, if Gresham, Fairview, Wood Village joined us, we're probably down to the average for Tualatin Valley and Clackamas, you know, 240, you know, we can reduce it because of the economics of scale. So the more you have, and you can split the cost and it goes down.
And I do think you'll see in some of these examples, what has happened in multiple places is where they dissolve an existing fire district to join a larger one, which is also two ballot measures at the same time. And I think it's just, you know, you put both measures on in every spot and try to explain it as simply as possible. I do think that helps the voter understand.
Rich?
Point of observation, I believe that Troutdale, well, I think all the cities have common borders, at least somewhere, right? So if one didn't make it, but the others did, there's still continuity there. Any combination thereof seems to work that way, but it does totally mess up the numbers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we've got to give the voters some kind of numbers so they know what they're looking at. It's kind of like if this, then. People don't do so well with if this, then type statements, unless they're programmers. So it is rather complicated, probably more challenging than some of these other ones, right? I'm not sure exactly how we get around that. And then if Troutdale is reducing their rate to do the fire district, the cities are so close, the citizens over at the next city are probably going to say, well, how come we're not getting the same deal? Right? So,
Yeah.
and it reminds me of the vacation in the station wagon scenario, where you're asking the kids in the back, what do you all want for lunch? And they're all screaming different things. How do you ever know where to drive?
I think that was our takeaway was none of this is simple, right? Like we've taken a lot of slides to walk you through it. And there's not a decision that needs to be made at the beginning, but at some point you're gonna hit a split in the road. And the question is, do we all hang together? Do we all lobby the station wagon until we get to one, you know, we don't really wanna go to Arby's, but fine, we're all gonna go to Arby's because we can agree on that. Or are you like, we're never gonna agree, so we're gonna go to Arby's and then McDonald's and then Taco Bell? And so that's the challenge we're presenting is, you know, if you really come to the conclusion of like, we're not all necessarily gonna get there, you know, and there's a scenario where one of the cities might not authorize this, then maybe it's worth thinking about kind of a path that allows each city to advance on its own. But there's a lot of complexity in that model, right? Because you have so many different measures, so much different modeling that goes on. Like, I think it would only be like, we can't really guarantee we're all gonna get to the finish line together, so let's hedge our bets and kind of spread the chips around the board, and hopefully we all get there, and if we don't, then, you know, the ones who do, we'll figure it out. So,
And I know you talk about Newburgh and you talk about Benville. Have we had a case where it's been this many cities trying to move
Not that I'm
move it all
aware
at
of.
once?
Or more
No.
than one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll talk, my next slide is about Newburgh, so I will talk through that, because I do think it was equally complex in some ways. And then, you know, there are simpler examples too, but I think, you know, in McMinnville, for example, they did the city of McMinnville, and then they had a rural fire district outside that dissolved, and then they created it together. So there are certainly different scenarios of, you know, different jurisdictions teaming up to do it. Will tell you, McMinnville, when they started the conversation, was 6 jurisdictions originally, when they started the mapping and the modeling years and years ago. And over time, more and more and more dropped off, and it ended up just being them two doing it by themselves.
One thing we do know about our constituents is that they're reactive, right? So we really don't know what we're gonna run into until we start proposing it and it becomes common knowledge out there. And we see how much resistance we get.
Yeah,
And there's certain people that are more reactive in different cities than others
yeah,
and may pose a challenge.
yeah, absolutely. Well, in your seat, if we get our slideshow back, you will see, we do, you know, break it down into, I think, 5 different phases. And, you know, obviously phase 1 would be a lot of, you know, convening behind the scenes with the decision makers to see where you want to move forward. But we suggest engaging the community at that point. I think we all even talk about doing a poll really early on to see where people are at on the issue and just start talking to them about it. Because there's no harm in saying, hey, we're exploring doing this. We want your feedback early on. What do you think?
Seems like a good idea because then you find out how much opposition or headwind you're gonna get.
Absolutely. And that could then help with the other stakeholders at the table. You know, if people are on the fence, to say, hey, this is really popular, you know, we should do this.
There's gonna be a lot of education. Tanny?
Yeah, and I guess that was kind of my other question is, so how do you package this up to be something positive? Because it really isn't. It's gonna cost more and it might be the same as what you're getting today. And if we expand it, there's gonna be a bond involved. So frankly, it's gonna cost you even more.
Let me au contraire. Because the positives are that, and again, it's how you sell positives. It really is. I mean, one, you all of a sudden have control of a fire department, which you didn't have before. In terms of, you have a say in the chief, you have a say in the budget, you have a say in the service model that they use. And second of all, you're allowing more money from the general fund to be devoted to parks and law enforcement. So those are the upsides that you try to present them with. Because you're right, it does cost more money.
Right.
But you'll get something more for your money is the argument you try to make.
I think
Well,
that,
and that's true, you're going to get more, and you're going to get a seat on a board with 6 other people, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not,
No, oh, sure, I'm not saying.
it's
cities
not like,
themselves,
this
they'll
is
never
like,
say,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, it's the greatest thing to ever come down
Oh, gosh.
84.
No, but in terms of
But,
this, the
but
tax.
right now, we keep going back and forth with, nobody's ever gonna invest in the station out here, the equipment out here.
Right.
I mean, Fire District 10 can't, Gresham will never put the money into it, and we don't have a say.
Right, that's the weirdest thing, is our fire station is owned by Fire District 10, run by Gresham Fire, and we're just here being served. And that fire station is old and needs updating. Well, who's gonna pay for it? Well, we don't own it.
and I do think that's, you know, work that you would do over time to really distill what the direct positive benefits would be. I will tell you, for example, reduced response times polls extremely high. If there's a way that you all can pan it out so that this change would reduce response times, that would be great. I think similarly, you know, with McMinnville, it was adding 18 new trained staff. It was building new substations so that they were more equally located throughout the area to reduce response times. So I think you'd really kind of have to peel back the services to find those benefits and pull them out.
Right, and that's one of the things that, you know, when we arm wrestle with Gresham is that if you look at our response times now, our response times are anything from 30 to 60 seconds less than citizens of Gresham get. So we are getting reduced response times compared to citizen suppression currently.
But they're higher than the national average.
Oh, they're all higher than the national average, so we're
Yeah.
even worse.
Yeah.
Double it.
We're getting less response times, or they're
Yes.
greater response times?
Better response time than Gresham, but you're still likely to die.
No,
Yeah.
no,
You're
no.
still gonna die.
I
so
thought
don't
we
worry
were-
about
The
it.
fire department shows up slower in Troutdale than it does
They're
if you live
greater
in Gresham.
response times.
About 30 to 60
Oh,
seconds.
thanks. Long-
Ours are
Yes.
slower.
Right,
Ours are
depending on
slower.
the quarter, depending on whether it's a fire or it's medical emergency. I think in the past I've given you some of those, but I've got all the
Yes, that's why I was
charts.
trying to clarify,
Yeah.
like that didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And the piece I'll add is, as you guys know, because it's your life, you know, making the public service tangible to the community is 80% of the battle. And so I think there's a real compelling story here to tell about kind of the modernization of fire and emergency response in the community and looking forward. Maybe I'm just like this Portland guy, but you know, until the gorge burned a few years ago, it was inconceivable to me that we would have forest fires like right here. You know, like it was always like, oh, that's a really wet climb, you know, I couldn't even envision. But I think obviously you all, more than us, recognize that as reality. You're getting more ice storms, which you guys take on the nose every time it happens, you know, so there's a lot of extreme weather events. You think about the industrial development happening next to the airport. I mean, I don't know how specific you want to get, but I can imagine a major event at FedEx or Amazon, you know, do you even have the assets right now to deal with a major fire? So you want to kind of tell that story to people, like, our community's changing, the threats are growing, we have more people, we have more situations that might require like a full fire response. This is what we recommend to make sure this community is safe. And so I think there is a story to be told there. You have to do some work, because you're right, people don't, it's not top of mind ever about like how do we respond to fires in this community or other emergencies, but I think when you walk people through the conversation, like, oh yeah, that does make sense.
Right, strategically, you could think about adding another bond levy as part of it, which is for a new fire station.
But, and again, back to my original question, it's kind of what I'm saying is, okay, we're gonna raise your taxes 25 or 30%, and you're gonna get
Right.
kind of what you're getting today.
Well, and if we have some story about faster response
Right.
time.
Right.
That's what we would
assets to
need.
Manage it. You know, and also like, for instance, in Minville, they had to be frank and say, you know, the backbone of our fire service is volunteers. And we do not have the volunteer support that we had 25 years ago. You know, the culture of volunteerism of my dad was a volunteer firefighter. I'm gonna show up and do that. It's going away.
Oh, the whole nation.
Yeah.
Volunteer fire departments are just dying on the vine because the requirements and the desire and where people live and commute, you're just not near enough.
Well, and on McMinnville's site, I was just reading, they were pretty honest on, we have gaps and here are our gaps.
Yeah, exactly. They were honest about, because there are less volunteers, we are having issues reaching the funding we need. That's why we need the district.
Yeah, we saw the fire district yesterday, so that was interesting. So fire, the interesting thing about fire is people are less concerned about fire because we've done such a good job with prevention. It's actually more about medical since the 70s, right? Can we get there in time to actually save a life, or do we get there just to help transport what's left? Right?
And I think everyone knows that you can't rely on the county's provider right now. So
No.
it's the job of the public safety agencies. to
That's the
provide
other
that.
element too, because there's a lot of fire departments in the state of Oregon who do transport also. We're one, you know, metro areas, one of the few areas that doesn't have the fire department do the transport. So that could be another, that would take a legislative change, but it's another part of it.
Pretty good? Okay.
Okay, so diving into some of our case studies, we were fortunate to talk to the folks at TVF&R about their Newburgh annexation, because they are the most recent example in the Portland metro region of a city annexing into an existing fire district. So Newburgh and their rural fire protection district annexed into TVF&R in November 2017. This was 6 total ballot measures over the course of 2 elections, which was an interesting occurrence. And this was a combination of the city initiating and the Rural Fire District Board initiating. So for the city in November 2017, they had two measures. One asked should they join TVFNR permanently, and then one asked if they would like to amend their charter to limit the property tax rate to be levied if the annexation is approved. The rural fire district at the same election asked if they wanted to dissolve the rural fire protection district and join TVFNR permanently. All four of these measures passed in November 2017. So TVFNR communicated to their residents, so this is in the existing district, that voters in both the city of Newburgh and Newburgh rural areas voted in favor of annexation. So this is an interesting thing we found along the way, but we're pretty sure TVFNR was exempted from automatically being required to call an in-district election.
I think it's because if the population coming in
Yes.
is less than 5% of the overall,
It's 20.
20. okay.
Yes, yeah. But exactly, Newburgh and their rural district was less than 20% of the overall TVFNR, so they were not required to call an election, but Oregon law allows 100 electors to fill out a petition and require them to have an election, which because of some specific local politics happened to them. So the Newburgh votes were in November. In December, the 100 petitions were submitted to Washington County, and that required them to call another election, which happened March 2018, and ask voters within the district of TVFNR if they wanted to approve. That was two more ballot measures. Do you want to approve Newburgh and do you want to approve the rural district, which passed with over 90% yes votes. And there were some really interesting nuances of how this all went down. One, as Jake kind of alluded to, TVFNR was able to communicate to voters that not only would this not increase their taxes, but it might make their taxes go down because their service area was getting broader. When we talked to TVFNR, they noted that their biggest challenge with having two elections was that the Department of Revenue has an April 1 deadline to begin collecting taxes for the new area. Otherwise, you could be responsible for providing service without the ability to collect taxes. Again, you unfortunately will not be able to be exempted from having two elections if you pursue the annexation route, but it was an interesting dynamic nonetheless. TVFNR said 2 years was not enough time to navigate all these processes and that a 36-month timeline had the highest probability of success. They also recommended there's a primary quarterback of the whole project. They had one employee lead their annexation. She described it as hundreds of hours of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, the other example is much simpler. That is Boring Fire District annexed into Clackamas Fire District. And you were there, right, Ray?
Yes, I'm in the Boring Fire District that's not Fire District 1.
Yes. So this was simpler than Newburgh. This was 3 ballot measures. They all happened on the same date in November 2016. Boring successfully annexed into Clackamas Fire District. The 3 measures were asking the Boring Fire District residents to dissolve their existing fire district, then asking the Clackamas Fire District residents if they wanted to let the Boring residents in, and then asking the Boring residents if they wanted to annex it. All 3 passed, and the annexation was successful. Sorry, we lost. Stand by.
Stop sharing, reshare. It's a long way.
So this was simpler as in not as exciting as the Tualatin Valley.
Apparently not.
measure.
Yes, yeah. Did it feel simpler on the other side, Ray?
Yeah, it was for us, they hardly did any advertising or
Yeah.
marketing to us at all.
Yeah.
Very low key, the whole process.
Did you lose your Wi-Fi?
Yeah,
Ray, would you mind running the rest of the PowerPoint?
let's try to reconnect, let's see. if this is
Okay,
successful.
hold on. We're having trouble with the Wi-Fi.
Trying to use my hotspot.
The problem is that some of the fonts don't come through because you have some proprietary font.
That's okay, as long as no
What
one.
slide are you on?
We are on slide 24.
24. You ran along. Okay. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, thank you. So, all of the measures passed. For these three, it happened in February 2017, it was completed, and like I mentioned, they were not exempt from holding an election in district, they had both at the same time, and this was the board resolution approach.
I'm trying to find my button, full screen, sorry.
I'm right.
So, the next slide is about forming a new special district instead of annexing in. Before I talk about this, are there any annexation specific questions that have come up for folks? Okay. So, forming a new special district has pros and cons compared to the process we just outlined. So as we've talked about, the city of McMinnville did this successfully in the 2023 election. This can be done in two ways that are both different from all the other ways I just outlined before. So one is a referral from Multnomah County, or the other is an initiative petition. Either of these options would result in one ballot measure for all the jurisdictions. So you wouldn't have to worry about a bunch of different city ballot measures, and there would be no vote by residents of an existing fire district because you're not joining anything, you're starting a new one. McMinnville did their measure through referral by Yamhill County. So the first way to form a new special district is pretty complicated and a pretty high bar. It's running an initiative petition. And I want to be really clear, this is different than the elector petition process I described for annexation. This requires you to collect signatures of 15% of the electors in the region that you're hoping to join the district. So that would be a lot of people. If it's just the 3 cities, it might be okay, a couple thousand, I think. But if you add Gresham in, I think that would be a really big lift because it cannot be initiated or run by a city or a public entity. It has to be done on not work time, or again, by possibly like the firefighters union if they so choose, or a volunteer
And they
committee.
are quite in favor of a fire district.
Excellent. Well, they very
sure
well might
they
do
are.
it. So McMinnville was planning to do an initiative petition, but then they worked with Yamhill County, and Yamhill County said, we will refer it with you. Can you go to the next slide? You're off the clock.
I know. I'm
So-
trying to play along at home.
That is the other way to do it. The county can initiate forming a district by, doing a certain set of things and starting the process. They would need a resolution from all the cities within that are hoping to join in the area. But then they can get it started, and then you don't need to signature gather or collect a petition. So in this scenario, Fire District 10 could not refer anything for you all. They wouldn't be involved. You have to go to the county, and they would initiate the annexation process. And then because there would be a tax rate associated with it, the county would call an election. Again, that would just be the one ballot measure that would ask the question, do you want to create, whatever you decided to name it, fire district? Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, question on that one.
Yeah.
So what I thought I heard you say was that if all 4 cities were included in the Board of Commissioners voted to do it, right? That if Wood Village, Fairview, and Troutdale said no, they could be outvoted by Gresham voters because it's the total of all the area?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that,
No, say.
there you go.
I'll add that to this cons list when I go over it. But yeah, so these are kind of the pros and cons kind of about forming a new special district in general and compared to annexation. So the pro is that the county board is the simplest way to do this. I think doing it via initiative petition would be a really heavy lift. That being said, and we know this from experience with McMinnville and Yamhill, it requires a lot of reliance on the county, and it really depends how involved the county wants to be. But ultimately, it is the county's measure that they move forward. So it is the county council who is drafting the ballot title, the explanatory statement, and kind of managing the different pieces of the process. So I think to go this route, you would have to, develop, if you don't have, a good relationship with the folks doing that at the county and feel confident in moving it forward. The big pro of forming a new special district instead of joining Fire District 10 is you'd have more ownership over naming the district, establishing the governing body type, electing the board, all of those pieces you'd be able to kind of start from scratch to set up exactly as you want and have control over them.
I think that's one of the reasons, I've heard the scuttlebutt is that Gresham prefers starting a new district if they're gonna go this route. I think that's probably one of the reasons. And they wanna name it probably Greater Gresham Fire District.
So then the cons, like I mentioned, the initiative petition process would be a really big lift. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and you wouldn't be able to do it as a public employee on time. You're starting from scratch in the negative way. You need to set up new operations, new government, and it might be more expensive to stand up a new district. That being said, Fire District 10 is 6,000 people, so if it did go from 6,000 to 136,000, you'd basically be starting from scratch anyway, as far as I'm concerned. It would be changing really drastically. So yeah, I think this path would also make a lot of sense. Next slide. Okay, before we move to the timeline, are there any questions about forming a new district or anything else we've covered? Okay, well.
Could the Board of Commissioners also put on the ballot dissolution of Fire District 10 and include Fire District 10's current coverage into the new fire district?
Yeah.
It probably would make a lot of sense.
I think, yeah, my only thing I'm not sure of, I think dissolution of Fire District 10 might need to be started by Fire District 10. It would then probably eventually go to Multnomah County, but yeah, as long as Fire District 10 wanted to do it, then that would need to pass concurrently with the other one, but yes.
Okay. And that's what happened in the rural fire district. They dissolved themselves. Okay, so these are my slides, and from here on out, I would say, think of this as kind of a thumbnail work plan. Obviously, you're seeing there's a lot of complexity, but we've tried to give you a sense of kind of at a high level what this would look like and broken down in these 5 phases. First would be kind of this formal exploration, which I think of where we are now, really trying to assess the options and talk to all the different key stakeholders and get a sense of where they're at and where there's alignment. And then from there, we move to kind of the next step, which would be the decision point. We've offered you a lot of different models. We've talked about kind of those different localities and how they would all need to shake out. So once you've kind of gotten a sense of where everyone's at and what the option set looks like, then there'll be kind of all right, which one are we gonna pick and what does that look like? How do we make that decision? Then moving forward, once that decision's made, that kind of clarifies what the next steps look like. We'll lay out a lot of stuff here about kind of what that would look like to get in place. Then what we call campaign underway, which is like the point where that's formally getting referred to the voters. And it's very clearly like, this is coming up public, we're gonna get you ready for it. And then the last step would be from measure certification through election day, which goes back to that question of, does the county refer it? Do you do it through initiative? But essentially kind of that last 3 months of once the public bodies have said, okay, voters, we're putting this measure for you, we referred it to the voters, what does that look like? And so for the rest of these slides, I'm gonna kind of walk through a thumbnail for each of these sections. So let's go to the first one. And again, I would say just as a general timeline, as Megan mentioned earlier, 24 to 36 months is probably what this looks like. And we would definitely lean towards the larger or the longer timeline just to allow for all these pieces. So let's go back.
Wait, who's in charge? I didn't do that.
I'm not doing that.
You want the next slide?
I'm gonna go back to the phase 1. Okay, I think there's one more. All right, so we've kind of broken these sections in 3 categories. First would be the logistical pieces. We need to figure out which cities are going to participate in the process, whether you're going to go annexation or new district, as Megan just walked you through. Make sure that Fire District 1 is open to the idea. There's going to be a whole process with the county's land use planning division, because again, this goes back to that mapping and the comp plan. You have to start conversations with the State Department of Revenue, which goes back to that mapping question. Have to start working with each individual city and their political leadership to kind of assess that they're all on board. Starting to talk to the county commission, particularly the newly elected one, who would obviously be your partner in this work for East County. So wanting to make sure Jones-Dixon is on board with this and is an active partner in the work. Also working to start to build a stakeholder table, because you want to think about beyond your city governments, who else is going to be involved with those other public safety agencies, any relevant unions, their key users or other folks driving the conversation. You want them at the table. then start to do these financial and feasibility models, which looks at things like assets and response time. There's a number of professional national firms out there that do this analysis, and then start talking to elections, an elections attorney. You know, we did real good, but we wouldn't pretend that we are attorneys, and so we always want to have an official lawyer to kind of look at our work and make sure that we didn't miss anything. So those would be the logistical phases, that parts of that first phase, and there's and then the next slide has a couple other elements I want to talk about as well.
And I just want to emphasize before we go on, in our conversations with TBF&R, talking to your county land use and the Department of Revenue was like one of the most important and complicated pieces. So that is really something, I think, as soon as you think, yeah, we think we're going to do this, start talking to them to get the process going.
Yeah. McMinnville figured out, after ballots had dropped?
Yep, yeah, after ballots were in
Were
voters,
people's hands.
they had a mapping error.
Yeah.
Which again goes back to the, you know, there was like a block basically that wasn't going to be taxed for the first year, but they had to provide services to them, and thankfully it was only a block, but yes, it's, you know, in the news.
And that was, you know, a subdivision that had been added a decade ago, and the county's assessor had thought that it got on the right maps, and then when it went to the Department of Revenue, they said it's not on the right maps. It wasn't the end of the world. They managed it as a PR issue, and ultimately 200 households got free fire service for a year, so it wasn't the end of the world. But it certainly was not what we were looking forward to when ballots were in voters' hands and everyone's like, wait, what happened here? So definitely do not repeat that if you can. So let's go to the next slide. So beyond that kind of logistical technical work, we also think it's important to start the conversation with the community. We want to start to have some introductory communications, at least make the public aware of this. You know, you are the ones who control your own story, so you really want to have that why clarified of why you're starting this conversation, so voters don't just kind of hear through the grapevine and make their own assumption. We also want to try and use your existing communication channel, social media, website, some public forums and things like that to kind of get an initial first blush opinion from the public. And then we'd also encourage you at some point to conduct a poll, because that will really test viability. We would hate to recommend you go through 36 months and we get to the end of this process and it's like the voters were never going to go for this. You know, they, for whatever reason, sometimes not even for what you're proposing, they weren't willing to go there. And so we really want to have that baseline understanding of where's the public on this issue and then how much work do we need to do? Because, you know, public entities get so involved in all the technicalities and the stakeholders, and then you're like, oh, right, the voters have to approve it. And if that doesn't get taken care of at the start, then it's like, oh, I'll be an unpleasant surprise at the end.
Jake, does your firm help with crafting articles and media posts and poster boards to set up in a room for doing a public forum?
Absolutely. I'm going to be in Woodburn on Thursday to do a town hall around their new community center. And Megan made those posters, so they're awesome. You don't want me making the posters, but yeah, we absolutely do that. So let's go to the next one. All right, so all that was exploring what the options were. Then it's time to make a decision. And so some of the things to think about as we're kind of reaching that decision point, we need to get the stakeholders back to the table, look at the feedback, decide whether to move forward. Is it that annexation or forming a new district? You need to start working with the elected officials, keeping them engaged. Also continue that work with the county and the state, and also determine which path to the ballot's most sensible and viable. Again, like we've offered these options, there's a lot of different permutations there. Have to pick one. And then frequently work back from election dates. You know, people like us will always tell you May or November of an even year is the preferred year for these type of elections, and odd year elections are really low turnout. You also sometimes can run into double majority issues with tax measures during odd years. And just turnout, you want a good turnout. You know, the ideal election is what's happening in November. A general presidential election, that's when everyone votes. That's always the best time to put something in front of voters because you know you're gonna get really robust turnout. And so, but you wanna be thinking of those kind of working backwards on the calendar of, you know, if we refer in May, for May, if we refer for November, when does that all have to go?
Well, that's an interesting psychology question. On low voter turnouts like this last one we had a couple weeks ago, for something like this, does that bring out the naysayers more likely that they have more influence as opposed to when there's a greater population coming out? I mean, it's just...
It's a good question, and I'd say frequently it relates to taxes. You know, no shock to any of you all, but older voters are the ones who consistently vote. They're more reliable. If you're 65 plus, whether it's your civic education as a kid or just how you approach the issue, you're going to turn that ballot in. It's the younger voters, minor diverse voters that tend not to vote. And also your older voters tend to be more tax sensitive. They're more likely to be on fixed income or things like that, more aware of kind of the cost to them. And so in a tax measure, we always like to have a larger electorate, so seniors don't dominate, because we know seniors are gonna be a little more stingy with approving increased taxes. It's an interesting question if this measure would have come across as a tax measure. I mean, I could see also saying, you know what? We just want to talk to the super engaged, educated voters. This is super complicated. There's not a revenue question in front of them. Let's just focus on a smaller electorate. And that's ultimately your polling will tell you, because your polling will say, you know, your super voters felt this way, your pretty good voters felt this way, your lazy voters felt this way, your voters who never vote felt this way. So you can kind of understand what your sweet spot is and where the people that are most in tune with this are. So let's go to the next slide beyond those logistics. You want to continue that engagement and communications work. You'll see that as a theme. We always want to be thinking kind of that internal conversation, how we bring people to consensus and bringing people along, but also sharing that with the larger public so that they feel included along the way. So we need to continue to keep them updated, do some more community engagement as we go to make sure that at least you can show that you did that step in the process, even if it doesn't dramatically change the ultimate outcome. So then we go to the next phase, which is moving forward. Okay, we've made our decision. We're gonna go for annexation, we're gonna go for formation, whatever that might be. At that point, it's really important to employ counsel. As I mentioned, it's really, there's a lot of technicalities and complexities here that we wanna make sure we got right. Continuing to work with those other partners around the mapping piece, the other things like that. You may even need to hire your own surveyor to go out and make sure you're getting all the plats right. You also have to work on those details, those other pieces about cost estimates, assets, service areas, mapping, all these different things. And as I said, there are consultants that work in the fire space across the country, and Minville worked with a couple consulting firms. So there are these experts that can come in and kind of do this analysis for you and help work through these conversations. Let's go to the next slide. And then once we know kind of the path forward, you want to move backwards on that election date, both when the council would refer to the voters or the commission refers to voters, as well as that upcoming election. You want to try and inform them about that in a neutral and objective way, but give them as much information as possible, because I'll tell you, I would be surprised if you could raise $1 million for a campaign like this. It's going to be a pretty low budget campaign on the political side. So the more work you can do on the public sector side to kind of engage and educate the public, so it's not up to a campaign to go do that and send a bunch of mailers to people, the better.
The other thing, just a side note, to know that back in 2003 or 2004, Gresham had a vote to rejoin Fire District 10. And back then, there was a large constituency of people, because ballot measure 5 and 50 came out of a lot of political people in East County, like Don McIntyre, Frank Eisenzimmer, Ted Sizemore, and they were still around and very active at that time. And so they were very big in opposing rejoining Fire District 10. That constituency, they're all dead. Gussie McRoberts, a former mayor of Gresham, was also one of those who opposed rejoining Fire District 10. So I just don't know if there's a real constituency out there right now that would oppose this the same as Gresham experienced back in 2003 or 2004. So
Yeah.
just an interesting history.
It's been surprising for us, you know, as political consultants. We're always expecting an opposition. You'd always have Taxpayers Association of Oregon and a couple other kind of loyal anti-government conservative forces that would show up. And you see, you know, I think they put some statements in against the zoo bond this election that just passed, but you really don't have that kind of anti-tax activist base. Now, I never say never, you know, I mean, you all are familiar with Damascus, so it certainly can happen, but it's more the exception now than kind of the expectation.
Well, and I would just add to that, I think, you know, the most prominent example I can think of opposition was to Metro's transportation bond a few years ago. And if you were following the inner workings, that happened because people at their stakeholder table felt ignored and not listened to and broke off and said, okay, we're going to oppose this. So that is just a good example of why that consistent stakeholder engagement, trying to keep everyone at the table, is really important throughout the process.
And we could talk more about Metro and bad mouthing, but we'll keep going.
Oh, no, I think Metro goes over really well.
Well, that's what I figured.
East County.
It's a friendly team, yeah. Yeah, I think they spent 95% of their stakeholder conversation on what the package would look like. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, we've got to pay for this, and we're going to stick it to the business community. And that did not go well.
Yep, the Portland Business Alliance or something, didn't they come out really strong against it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, it was only like 7 billion, I mean. it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
that
I
much.
know, yeah.
a rounding error, really. So let's keep going to the next slide. So, all right, so then you're moving ahead, you're referring it. Then we need to think about a few other things, formalizing that core team to make sure we're doing all the communications work prior to the election, keeping that stakeholder group at the table and engaged, particularly this is when you want to be listening. That's when misinformation or lack of information can crop up in the community, so you really want to make sure you're kind of getting the right information out to the community, also keeping those elected officials on board. I did a unsuccessful school bond in Gresham in 2013, and we thought we were doing really good. And then all of a sudden, former Representative Matt Wand came out and was strongly opposed, and it was like, oh gosh, we didn't even think about him. And so you want to be keeping people as friendly as you can, getting all those necessary vendors, and then thinking about those election deadlines to work backwards.
Sorry, we also forgot about Matt One too. He's a former city council member.
He's a good guy.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime I need
That's
to
a great guy.
junkie, he's the one I go to.
Yeah, he used to be really involved in the community, he lived in Troutdale, and then he moved out, and we haven't heard from him in years.
I feel like he just kind of
Yeah.
appears every so often. So let's keep going. And then we would also recommend this engagement and communication strategy, ideally giving us 8 to 12 months before the election day. And that allows us to really do some intentional work, do those community forums, meet with different stakeholders in the community, do some community surveys. And I think also you think about, in an ideal world, you've got at least 3, if not 4 different cities doing this work. So that's a whole level of complexity to make sure different teams are staying in coordination, that there's some information sharing, just a level of scale that's gonna have to occur. And then we get to phase 5, which is when things on the public sector side really sit back a little bit. So you're gonna refer either the county commission or the cities will refer this or an initiative. It goes to the county elections and then it's on the ballot. There's some specific things that need to be prepared there, drafting and finalizing those ballot titles. And those happen in different ways depending on the path to the ballot, as Megan mentioned. You also have to do your question, your summary, your explanatory statement. There's a lot of push-pull factor there about what's legally required and then how much you can really kind of make sure the message reflects what you want voters to be aware of. You also have some challenge periods that are in there where a member of the public doesn't like the way you titled that, it can go to court and challenge it. And then making sure those different jurisdictions are in alignment. As we mentioned, there's gonna be a lot of complexity dealing with a number of smaller localities that have to navigate, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with like trying to partner with Gresham and just how much bigger they are than you guys, and so we need to figure out how to make sure that works for everybody. And then last slide here, we would also recommend going ahead and doing a second public opinion poll. We'll do a lot of really good work to gauge public opinion, but the most scientific way is that phone poll that really gets a critical, gets a quantitative result that's sufficient to show what the public's attitude is. We also have to talk to city staff because once you refer the measures, what can and can't be said on the topic becomes very constrained. And then there's also measures and communications that can occur after that. So for instance, you all may be familiar, there's something called the safe harbor process with the Secretary of State. There's very precise rules under state law around what can and can't be said about a measure once it's referred to the voters. You have to include the price tag. You have to say, if the measure doesn't pass, this is what would happen. And so we, because no one else wants to, will frequently go through the Secretary of State's safe harbor process by which we say, this is the mailer we want to set out. This is the communication we want to put on our website. Will you bless this and give it your approval? And that can sometimes take several iterations until they're happy with language. But the advantage of that safe harbor process is then if anyone complains and says, oh, you guys are politicking or you violated state law, Secretary of State says, nope, absolutely not. We reviewed this before it ever went up. This was totally kosher. They're fine. And so it acts as your get out of jail free card if anyone claims that you're trying to work the ref or act in ways that are not appropriate under state law. And so that's that one. And then our last slide is we want to say where we can't help you. And obviously we would love to help you find the help you need, but we want to be really honest about it. So one is issue experts. We can do some R and district consolidation, but doing that more technical work about how you bring that stuff together, what the assets and how to restructure that, a market assessment, there are people who do that. If you're going to do a bonding process, obviously that needs an underwriter and bond counsel to do that all in an appropriate way. You all may be familiar with that. I can't remember if you guys have gone out for a bond recently, but it's pretty typical. That polling firm, you know, we collaborate and work with a lot of polling firms. We help them draft the poll, but I really want that independent person who can run the call house and know how to do the analysis and stuff like that. And frequently we'll be able to bring insight from hundreds of other polling projects and the work that they're doing for you. Capital construction work, facility assessment, design, engineer, construction, all of that stuff to talk about the physical facilities, what modernization work would need to happen there. An election strategy, communications, and engagement, elections consultant. Do you think we would do that? Or?
Yeah, that's us.
That's us. Okay, so that's the one we could do. Just want to clarify. And then the last one would be that ballot filings and title. You know, there's very specific rules under state law about what has to be included. You know, your caption can only be 10 words, and there's very specific requirements about what you get done in those 10 words. Your question can only be 20 words, and so you have to be pretty savvy about understanding that. And that's always a little bit of a dynamic where we're like, well, can we say this? And they're like, under the law, no, you can't say that. And we're like, well, what about this? And so we get to yes usually. And so that's where we really like to have that counterpart from a legal perspective. And I think that is it for us, so I will stop. We can turn this into discussion.
So you gave us a lot of information,
That was the goal.
but even if we had our foot on the gas, you pretty much are saying November of 26 would be the earliest that we could probably get this out, or should get this out.
Yeah, and I think, yes, 26, right? That's not off again. Yeah, 26, yes. I'm untethered from time. Yes, November 2026, absolutely.
Okay.
I think politically, May 2026 would make sense possibly, but I think for all the other pieces that need to come in, it would be a rush to do that.
We've also got Gresham's desire to join into it because they just passed their own 5-year bond levy that takes them to 2029. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we're done here, but they may want to be waiting a little bit longer to say 2020, the presidential election in can't even think I'm mentioning the presidential election of November 2028, because by then, both Biden and Trump, no matter who you are, they'll be gone.
I'm sure things will be much calmer.
Yes, we would hope.
We'll see.
So that may actually be the more practical date in terms of, I'm just thinking out loud here about Gresham.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot to talk about.
And I mean, you could see a pared down scenario where it's just like you and FD10 joining forces. That's probably more simple, but it seems like
At the end of the day, Fire District 10 could still dissolve into a new fire district as well.
Yeah.
So there's still options there for us to get it out of the general fund, start getting a say at the table. We could still start with our processes, so. Like you said, are we making all the stops at all the different restaurants, or are we just doing one? So.
If one were to start that way, then one could add the other cities as they want to join.
Yep.
Through their own processes. However, we might have trouble with having enough equipment consolidation in order to launch. Right?
Correct.
That's why you'd have to do a bond too.
Yeah.
But you probably have to do that anyhow.
One thing nice about Fire District 10 is their expertise.
Right.
They have expertise.
But if we just join Fire District 10 and they farm it out to Gresham still, it's still low.
Yeah, but it would be a different contract.
Yeah, it needs to be a different contract. Still cost us more for the same service. Questions? Ken,
I'm good.
you're good? Rich? Questions?
This tells us a lot about the mechanics of how to do it. We still have to get to what we want to do, right? So we know what direction to head into.
Ray, anything else?
Nope, that was a lot of good fire hose you, but it's a good start to
Yeah,
understand
make
what.
sure, we get the presentation, because we're all gonna have to probably reabsorb.
we got a question online.
Oh,
Jeffrey.
Hi, yeah.
Hi.
Quick question. How about can you give us a ballpark figure of how much this would cost to do from start to finish?
I asked TVF&R for a number of how much it cost them. She said what she gave us was hundreds of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars. She did say she's planning to retire, so she's trying to, memorialize it all. So she's working to come up with the cost. So I can certainly let you know when she lets us know. I think more than hundreds of thousands of dollars. No, I think frankly, a lot of the cost comes from a lot of the modeling that needs to be done, the financial feasibility, the review of all those pieces. I do think there are some scenarios where cities have to pay for the elections themselves or pay the county to have an election. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but that could, paying for the election could be a possibility too. Paying the different, attorneys, if you're doing communications efforts, paying for a lot of our efforts are doing digital ads that they pay for in direct mail. So costs are associated with that as well.
And where does that money come from?
I think that's a question for Ray.
The general
Donations. It's a political fundraising, like a campaign. That's why generally I would assume you start off with a political campaign committee, file it, organize it, get it started, get the right people on it, and then you just start raising money.
Right. To be clear, everything I just described would be paid for by the government.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the study stuff, right.
Yes,
But in
yes,
terms
yes.
of political marketing side,
Yes, yeah.
you're gonna have to.
I think that depends, like, we certainly work with jurisdictions who are sending out informational mailers and digital themselves, but yes, absolutely, and then the more you can put in your political side, the better, absolutely.
But wouldn't
But
you
we're
say
still,
probably, oh, go ahead, sorry, Jeff.
sorry, but we would still be using taxpayer money to make some of these things happen. Is that my understanding correctly?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, Teeny, sorry.
No, I was probably say, wouldn't you be close to 500,000 before you drop ballots?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
And I'd say, we really enjoyed this project. We thought it was really fun. So, we are more than happy to kind of explore a as-you-go relationship if you want us to kind of take that next step and say, go find some vendors for us, talk to McMinnville, what do they cost? And I know a lot of the localities will frequently look to the legislature. So for instance, the work we did with Multnomah County Drainage District, they got an Oregon Solutions grant to do a lot of that design and planning work, and that was several years ago. Woodburn got a state grant to do a lot of their planning work. So, there may be some options where you could go out and get some additional resources to fund some of this work as well. I don't know if you want to turn it into an Oregon Solutions project. I know that has pluses and minuses, but I'm just saying, I think there are some untapped resources out there to help localities kind of work through these governance or kind of operations questions.
And I think at the end of the day, the goal is that the fire services better serve your residents, right? So I think if you're able to tell the story that, we put years and years and your taxpayer money into this to serve you better, to make your response times better, to save more lives, I think there's a story to tell there, and you could be transparent about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out.
I'm serious, we really did have a fun time doing all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of great information.
Yeah.
Good to
A
have.
lot of information.
Really appreciate it, thank you.
And you got my address, send me the bill.
All right, Ray, you giving us an update on law enforcement?
Yes, a couple notes for you on law enforcement. On April 30th, I met with the sheriff and her financial department. Their bean counter down there, the administrative head, and we walked through with them the changes that we wanted to see in the FTE, as we've talked about before, which is increasing the chief from 0.67 to full-time, and then the idea that they don't have any other major assignment except Troutdale. That's it. They just do Troutdale. which is a little shift for them. They have to kind of think how that might work, because they've never done it that way before, but Clackamas County does it in all their contract cities, which are like 4 or 5 of them. And the other thing is that the Chief Asbo and I talked, and we're gonna go meet with the Happy Valley chief and how they run it over there too. So that, we talked about taking the 0.5 FTE beach deputy, making it a 1 for a second community resource deputy. So they thought, great, we'll start figuring out what those are, because they have to reprice the whole contract again. But they also says, we have to all look at, because the contract also says that we're paying for 1 detective, 1 office assistant, and 1 records technician. And they're trying to figure out, does Troutdale impose more than 1 of each of those on the sheriff's office, to know whether, because back in 2014-15, Rich, right? We were estimating what the workload would be on the sheriff's office for adding Troutdale. And so now they're trying to analyze, well, are we under FTEing you for those staff positions? So they're looking at those issues right now also, and I appreciate it. It was a good conversation to talk about. They're really wanting to continue the relationship. And I said, all right, so how long do you want before you get back to us? They said middle of June. Get back to us with where they're at with, do they think they need to increase some of the FTEs for us, and what the pricing might look. And I have on my calendar to check back with them on June 18th. So on June 18th, if I don't hear anything from them, I will call them and bug them and find out a report from them. So that's their kind of timeline for getting us some information on what that looks like.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how they quantify their FTE of how they potentially up that FTE or expense, right?
Right, it's interesting, because I know the office assistant was a former Troutdale employee, and she does other things other than Troutdale work, and she hasn't been working for the last 8-9 months. Those of you on the Public Safety Equity Committee, Teresa hasn't been around for a long time, and they've been kind of spot filling it in, and we haven't gotten any support, so we haven't really gotten a full office assistant either during the contract.
Yeah.
But the detectives, when I talk to Happy Valley, they say generally one detective should have an ongoing caseload of 15 cases. Well, I don't know how many detective cases come out of Troutdale. I don't know.
Was that on some of
was gonna
ASBO's
say, don't
paperwork?
forget.
I have to look and see what that was.
Yeah,
Right.
and it was not, I mean, it was a couple of cases, it was not,
It's
Yeah.
not 15.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was less than 10.
See, they don't know. The other thing is
Yeah.
how many records do we shove into that office over there that one tech can do it all? They don't know. But I think definitely, based on those numbers that you see, the detective and the office assistant, we've been overpaying for those positions too, like the chief.
Yeah,
So we'll just wait and see, yeah.
okay, more information to come.
Yeah, but at least we're moving forward, and they understand, and we want to get this figured out sooner than later, because once we start getting a better idea and can reach some agreements on what the FTEs look like, then they can crunch the numbers and say, all right, this will cost you X if you want this. And then once I get those FTE numbers, then I can go to Gresham and say, hey, this is what they're offering for these FTEs. You guys are interested in providing that service and increasing your FTE to cover these things also. It's just get another bid. So we'll wait and see what they say. And
So
along,
we're waiting to engage Gresham until we get something from them.
right, we get a better feel for what the sheriff's office thinks their FTE size should be too. But along with that, I'm having a meeting Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Jensen Strategies, who is doing the study to figure out what it would cost to establish and then run a Troutdale Police Department again, I'm having the draft meeting with them on Friday, which means they're gonna walk through the draft with me to say, does the draft look good? Did they miss anything before they do a final report for us? So I will try to remember after Friday, first of next week, to send you an update what I learned from Jensen when we'll get their final report. So we should have that number by our next meeting from Jensen Strategies. I'm also waiting for them to give me, I think it was the middle to the end of July, they were looking to get the fire one, by the way. Speaking of that. So anyway, but I just know this Friday I'm having a meeting, and I'll know first next week, be able to tell you how soon we'll get that final report on those numbers. So that's all I got on law enforcement right now.
Any questions for Ray before we jump off of law enforcement? Kenny, you have got a question?
No, I just had a comment back on fire, and I'll save that for later.
Cool, I'll talk about fire next.
Fire's coming next. Rich, good?
Good.
Okay.
Jeffrey looks good. Victoria's quiet, so let's move on to fire.
All right, fire. As you know, it's kind of related to it, the Gresham levy did pass relatively, like 57, 58% to like 43, something like that, versus the 50-50 loss pretty much that happened last year. So they passed that. And what that allowed us, I think it was 25 positions. If it didn't pass, they were gonna cut like 25 law enforcement and fire people. So it did pass for 5 years, so they're able to afford it. And so for them, the city of Gresham, I don't know if you're aware, the city of Gresham just renewed, they have a $15 per month per resident utility charge. The bond levy that passed was like $1.35 per thousand, which on the average home works out to about $26 per month or $320 a year, something like that. So Gresham residences per household generally are paying $41 per month toward law enforcement and fire right now, to pay for that. So that's where Gresham is at in terms of their paying. We don't know, as I alluded to earlier, we don't know what Gresham's attitude is. I've always said, does Gresham treat this as a, oh, pressure's off, we don't have to worry about a fire district or paying for the stuff in the future because we've got this extra money now? Or are they saying, okay, great, we have now time to plan for what the future holds for, law enforcement and fire? And so I don't know. I talked to Mike McKeel on Friday, who's the chair of the Fire District 10 board. He was meeting with City of Gresham officials on Friday. He and I traded calls today, so I was gonna get an update from him, because I'm just trying to get a feel for what's their attitude. It's something I should probably talk to Mayor Lauer about, because he's one, and the other mayors who talked to Mayor Stovall, and to figure out what their attitude now is going to be now that they passed their bond levy. I know that their fire union hasn't changed. They're in full support of a fire district. They think it's better for stable funding, and it's better to have a board that only deals with fire. They don't have to worry about fighting the city council who's trying to do budgets and argue about. They just would love to have a board that just does fire. So I know that push for fire district is not going to go away in the fire union. Just be curious to see what Gresham's approach is. I did meet with Fire District 10 on April 23rd after our last meeting. Had a great meeting. Chief Lewis was there, got a tour of, that's the newest fire station out there on, is it? No, it's not, it's 302nd. Has anybody been out there? Right there on Pleasant View Drive, just down the street from East Orient Grade School. That one. It's a nice one. They have the Fire District 10 offices there. They have great single bunk rooms for the different shifts and stuff. It's very nice. Like Chief Lewis gave me a tour of that. Very nice building. Met with the board. All good people. I think 3 of the 5 board members are former firefighters themselves, so they're very fire astute board. And in terms of the issue of joining Fire District 10, they think it's a great idea. They'd love to have everybody join them. And as I alluded to or mentioned earlier, the current $280 rate they're charging their residents would go down if all the cities joined them, because it would be able to spread more across, less across more. So they were really want to be cooperative about that.
And they have a good relationship with Gresham.
Pardon?
They have a fairly good
Yeah, they do.
relationship with
They do.
Gresham.
Chief Lewis was there, and he gets along with everybody great. It was really good. The issue of a new fire district didn't come up. Let's start again from scratch and just create a new district didn't come up with them. So I don't know what their thoughts are on that one. But really, if I said before, Gresham's the 800-pound gorilla. Because we're just kind of moving little deck chairs around here, dealing with our fire district issues. If Gresham's not going to play ball, we're kind of, there's no overall reaching thing. So finding out what they want to do will be important. I don't know, we may want to invite them, because I've mentioned to Jeffrey and Jordan in an email, on June 17th, the 3 cities are having a fire council meeting. The 3 councils are supposed to be meeting on June 17th. I believe we've invited Fire District 10 board. If not, I will make sure they've been invited, so that there'll be a meeting, there'll be a Zoom link and everything available for everybody, just to get because the mayors from the 3 cities have been talking a lot. The city managers have been talking a lot, but they felt it was good to get all the 3 councils together to talk on these issues, to discuss where our next steps are, what we should be doing. And as you're probably aware, Fairview is much worse off financially than Wood Village and Troutdale is. their general fund is really tight for fire and police and 911. Wood Village and Troutdale is not quite as bad. So they really are interested in pursuing it. So, but it'll be a chance for all the boards, councils to meet on June 17th. As I mentioned earlier, the only scuttlebutt I've heard is that Gresham would consider a new district as opposed to Fire District 10. And after tonight, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, there's a lot of reasons to look just for a brand new fire district. I think it makes it easier to combine all the services, to combine the fire stations, to be able to start a whole new polity, I mean, a whole governing structure, just to make it brand fresh new, that might solve some of the problems of trying to join this small little fire. Because joining 12 United Fire is a little easier because it's a huge organization. So cities that join it, it's a little easier, but it's kind of the opposite here. We're all, except for Wood Village, I think all the Fairview, Troutdale, and Gresham are all bigger than the residents of Fire District 10. And Fire District 10 doesn't have a fire department. They just own some buildings. That's all they have. So I think that's why Gresham considered that. Now I better understand why they'd want to push that side of it. And the interesting idea that you don't need to have each individual city approve it, as opposed to it's a county-driven bond levy or ballot measure that the residents overall do.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting to rely on the county for help to move this along.
Yeah, and I have, I talked to Vince Jones-Dixon, who's going to be our new Multnomah County Commissioner, about a month ago, and I agreed that I'd get a hold of him and we'd sit down and meet, because I haven't had a chance to meet with him and talk to him. This will be one of the issues I'll talk to him about, just brief him on this. And Gresham, hopefully we'll learn from Gresham what they want to do. So, and hopefully Gresham, side note, hopefully Gresham, their leadership stability is set. Eric Schmidt has been finally offered a contract. They've got a contract, they're making him the permanent city manager. So they'll finally, after a year since Nina left, they'll have a permanent city manager, which kind of helps them start focusing on long-term issues. The last thing is I gave you some documents in your packet, and I just wanted to go through them and kind of tell you what they are. They usually are generally self-explanatory, and some of them are kind of small, and that's why Ray pulls out his reading glasses, because
Do you have them electronically to throw up?
yes, I have them electronically, and I think Sarah sent you a form of one of them, because one of them that was the Excel spreadsheet, oh my goodness, it printed horrible.
Pages,
Yeah, so, but you do have the electronic copy of the Excel spreadsheet, and I can send them all electronically to you. But these were documents that were given to the other R3 mayors from Gresham's mayor, Stoll. So this is with the origination, where he started having his staff put together this information. And so this information came from Gresham, just know that. The one, which is the charts and table one with the pretty stuff on front, that just tells you the overall, I'll just go through, see if you have any questions about it. This is the overall cost of the fire department over the last, 15 years. Their expenses and how it's grown. It's pretty obvious it's grown a lot, and then they show you the green line down below tells you that the payments from the three cities have not kept up with the cost of the department. Right below it shows how much we've paid each year since 2014, and how much all three cities have increased. As you notice, we started at the beginning of the contract at 1.6 million. We're currently paying almost 2.8 million at the next year, the last year of the contract. That increase hasn't been as much as the cost. But again, that's why we always build into these contracts, like the sheriff contract, we always have a range, a floor and a ceiling, where the cost can only go up so much in a period of time, which is partially because we don't have any control over those costs. And so we get the providing agency, whether it's the sheriff's office or the fire department, Gresham, to say, all right, great, we'll only, I think we're maxed at 4.5 on each of the contracts, even though at times Gresham's costs may go up, but we have no say in that. That's something they agree to do. So that's that sheet. The other sheets after are very similar information. They calculated that if all four cities' citizens were all paying the same, Troutdale should be paying, 3.7 million instead of 2.7 million, all right? And then they show what the other cities should be paying, so the 3 cities should be paying about $2.5 million more per year than they are now. You know, my big argument, I think I've shown you before where I got the talking points I've created as to why we shouldn't be paying the same as a Gresham resident. We're not getting the same response times, we don't have any control over chief, budget, union contract, quality, level of services. I mean, we have no say at all, which would dictate that we shouldn't be paying the same as Gresham because we're not getting the same fire department or the same control.
We don't own anything.
Yeah, and so there's a reason we pay less. And so telling us that we're paying this much less, well, that assumes that we're all equal with Gresham residents, and we're not. So,
Yeah, and then look at the call volume percentages too.
But if I could on that.
yeah, that's not a good cheat. Look at the electronic one. It's
No,
hard.
but if I look at table 2, Ray,
Yeah,
Which page are you on? I got,
this is the second
it
page.
doesn't have a page number.
Yeah, it's the, so start to 10-year history of Gresham Fire Department call volume by each of the 4 cities. This one.
So if I do the fuzzy math on this and I look at it, and basically Gresham's saying that they're overpaying by 2,400 and we're underpaying by $1 million and yada, 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 right? Based on this math.
Yeah,
So if I look at this and then I look at the call volume, okay, so to start the engine, to fire it up, if you're in Gresham, it costs $2,400 every time they start it up. Troutdale, it costs $2,845 every time they start it up, based on the number of calls for 2023. And then if I take that same call volume and I use their population model, okay? Use the other model. For Gresham, it would go to $2,207 for every call, and Troutdale would go to $4,002.
how is that possible?
yeah.
I was doing the same math you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked about that once before.
Oh, if we paid them what they're suggesting we should be
Right.
paying?
And I guess my,
Oh,
okay,
okay. Yeah.
so you're coming at us with a model that's practically double and saying this is a good deal for you.
Yeah, so what is
Is
the
there like
cost per call? Right.
Hypnotism or something that comes along with this?
Yeah, that's a good analysis. Another thing to throw back on my talking points is, you know, response time, control issues, and our call volume is much less per capita than yours.
Yeah.
Right.
The cost per call is actually more out here versus Gresham.
Well, substantially more.
Yeah.
Is what they want us to.
Mathematically, maybe not operational cost, but mathematically, based on how much they say we should be paying, based on how much service we're requesting, it'd be a higher number that we'd be paying
Right, but we have one
per
station,
call.
right?
Right,
We have one station, and so we can fairly well assume that those 917 calls are originating for the most part out of 75.
Yeah,
And so of those calls, we're paying $2,800 every time they push start on the truck.
right.
And Gresham says, okay, you need to pay $4,000 every time we push start on the truck.
You need to pay more per call than what we're paying.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And that's where we push back and say, that's another reason to push back on, we should pay the same as Gresham residents. We don't call you as much as the Gresham residents.
we also don't own any assets.
Yeah,
And you brought that up already.
yeah, yeah.
well, and this doesn't break down where the money's being spent, right?
Well, it ain't being
But-
spent here.
It's not been spent on our station, it's been spent on other stations that service the growth within Gresham. Because it's the Gresham population that's growing.
Yeah. So, that's it, and the last page on that 3-page thing is just kind of duplicative, showing fire expenses covered by IGA revenue. Well, yeah, we already know that according to their argument, is that we're paying a less percentage of than we have been, because our increases per the contract have been less than their actual expenses, so we're paying a smaller percentage of the overall budget of the Gresham Fire Department. But I am gonna go back, Annie, thanks, I'm gonna actually dive into the actual numbers from the quarterly reports and just calculate that out, because it's another good talking point when we start talking to them. All right, that's
It's
that
not
one.
really too difficult to put a
Yeah,
couple holes in the dike here.
Yeah, well, yeah, but again, most people, they only want the numbers that benefit their side, they don't think of the other side.
Yeah,
The other document is the aggression fire costs and three cities' revenue. Some more analysis, that you got there that kind of does kind of the same thing about the growth in the fire department over the last 20 years and how it's changed. The average has been just slightly less than 5% a year has been the increase in fire costs on average, but more in the last 14 than the years prior. It's a lot of just information, I don't know,
and I guess I would say keep in mind that, yet those costs are going up and going up significantly. But the other thing, when you look at like this model, if you're on a call, you're on a call. So it's not like you've got another team that is fulfilling that next call out of that same system necessarily.
yeah. And then the last one is the horrible tiny, which is an Excel spreadsheet. And honestly, I tried to look at it on the paper copy and I can't figure out that it really doesn't tell me anything more than I learned from the other two documents. I could pull this, yeah. I will remember to send you all the electronic document of that. So, anyway, that's just information to look at and just that they're providing. And then the last thing is I gave you the contract that I'm working with Sarah, and actually Sarah's referred me on somebody else because she realized in what we need and that the other two cities need, because the other two cities it's the one that says the Sarah Edmonds Scope of Services contract. That's a draft of it. It's basically the economic firm that did a lot of this work for Gresham last year that's going to go through and calculate what it would mean for an average Troutdale homeowner if the fire district was created or a new one was created. Would compression have any impact on that? What would that do to our taxes? What would it do to the residents if we reach, and I gave them just a scenario of, let's take $1 off the permanent tax rate the first year, 80 cents off the second year, and I just randomly, just so we can get a feel for what does that dollar figure look like if we did offer, like Newburgh did, a reduction in the permanent tax rate to help soothe in the new taxing authority. So that was in there. The other thing I had them want to figure out for us is, I know some people get real nervous at this one. What would it raise if we had a $10 per month public safety fee on our utility bill for people? Just to know what that would raise. It's just nice to know. Not that the council is talking about or considering it, but my duty as staff is to give council and this committee options. Roughly, I think it gets you about $500,000 a year. If you just did a $10, Gresham does a $15 plus a $26, they do $41 pretty much a month. There you go, 528,000. Thank you, Tandy. That's what I was guessing. About $500,000, because I just generally know how many residential units are out there. But the idea, the reason we bring it up is, one, we don't know what the fire and police contracts are going to be come budget year 25-26, the first year of the new contract. If we get together and we're pursuing a fire district, it may not be till 2028, 2029.
Right.
And we don't want to be, if we have to spend an extra $1 million a year for fire and police, let's just throw out a number, we don't want to be sucking down that ending fund balance over those next 3 or 4 or 5 years, or we'll have no ending fund balance. All our savings will be gone. So it's a tool in the toolbox to say, all right, to slow down the bleeding until we can get to a fire district, maybe we do and ask the citizens to pay $10, $5, you can take that number, Tandy. That's why I figured I picked $10, easy to multiply. If you want to do a $5, you get X. If you want to do a $12, you get Y, etc. So that's the other thing that report will have, so that this information will be in there. And each city is going to get their own separate report with all the same questions, just so they can present it to their people, and it'll have their internal numbers for all these issues. So
Eric wouldn't like you calling it a savings account.
I know, but it's the best thing that I can come up with, because it's not a savings account. It's the money left over from the prior year's budget, adding up to, but it's the money we start with in the bank, each budget year. And side note, Carol, I am sad because the Reynolds School District, oh my goodness, your ending fund balance started this year at $40 million. Your budget for next year is starting it at $18 million.
Don't get her started.
Oh, I know. Somehow Reynolds School District budgeted to go through $20 million, half of its savings this budget year. The current administration did not create that budget at all, but
Okay, we're off topic.
yeah, off topic, but yeah, just so you know. But see, that's why you don't want to be drawing that down very quickly, because it ties your hands a lot in terms of what you do in the future. So anyway, that's that other piece of paper, just so you know, I'm finishing up that contract this week, to get that report going. Probably middle of July, end of July, we'll have those numbers, so we'll be able to know just what a fire district would cost.
Okay,
Question.
yes, Carol.
I don't pay the utility bills, my husband does. On the bill, do we pay anything now for fire? Is that
No,
taken out?
nope, you just pay for sewer, water, stormwater.
That's it.
That's it. And if you look at our bill compared to Gresham's or Portland's, for those items, we pay about 2/3 of what they pay for those services. I have a file back in my office where I have bills from all this.
And it's really nice water.
So I can imagine that if you decide to add a fire on that, on top of everything else that people pay, you're gonna have a lot of disgruntled
Yep,
residents coming at your door, Ray.
right, and that's why,
I don't know why you put it.
that's why the marketing has to happen. Well, you know, Gresham's gone through that, they've had to do it too, to keep up with stuff, and so at least we have our neighbor has for years, and for a lot more, has had to do it to support those services, so the argument is, we're gonna have to start.
Hope we don't
doing
have to
it too.
get there, but.
Yeah, it's just, it's a tool, and nobody's gonna like it, and we're still gonna have it, like my dear Mrs. Sutherland, you know, the oldest continuous resident of Troutdale, you know, she's on the reduced utility bills, because the council passed the senior citizen one. And for people on fixed income, well, it's not really fixed, because Social Security does go up a little bit each year, but, yeah, give me the look, I know, not a lot.
Like $10.
Yeah.
Come on.
It is an expense, but it's that or less fire, less police. And it's a tough call, it is. Anyway, that's the only part I have on fire, is just updating everything. There's a lot of other moving pieces that are going out there in fire, like, you know, getting those numbers, the study, getting the numbers going on what would it cost to create a fire department. You know, you asked us to do that, we're gonna do it. I don't know that it's gonna be practical.
Sounds like more information's coming toward the end of July.
Yeah, have more information, and the meetings that are going on between the councils, and learning what Gresham's gonna be doing on their fire.
Rich?
I just wanted to point out that when you're taking a look at the charts and graphs, realize that I think the majority of the calls that were coming out of the fire station were actually going to the assisted living facility that has actually recently closed.
It's no longer there.
So
Yeah,
that's a
they're
lot
turn-
of calls that are just about to disappear.
I would say the majority of
And show up in the new graphs.
it was the number one place for calls. I don't think it was a majority calls, but it was the highest call volume for any location in Troutdale was there, yes.
Yeah.
Because part of the problem is when anybody falls down in our zone, the staff won't touch them.
That's because we're told not to. Because if we have an injury, it's an issue.
Right, yeah, you let the
I
firemen
used to
come.
work there.
And so you give them a pillow and you tell them wait till the firemen shows
That's
up.
right. That's what we did.
Yeah. So yeah, so that may impact
So
our
I
call
want to
volume.
make sure that's in your mind,
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
know that.
Yeah, and just, I don't, did I tell you guys that it's gonna be a market rate apartment complex. Okay,
God bless America.
yeah,
Don't get her started.
yeah. Anyway, that's all I got, Mr. Chair.
Tanny?
Ray, I would say that I don't know that removing those would change it, but you could make it change it. I don't know that that complex changing is gonna change what Gresham wants to
Oh,
do.
no, they're gonna try to squeeze, I've listened to their council meetings talk about it, they think we're all a bunch of cash cows out here in the other three cities,
Right.
and they're gonna squeeze us, because we should be paying the same as a Gresham resident for not getting the same service, and we're gonna go, what?
The other thing, you know, to look at is, and not saying to do something or not do something, but you look at forming a fire district, for a lot of people, that's gonna be close to a $2,000 a year increase in their property taxes.
I don't go, in Gresham, average tax assessed value home is $226,000. This is gonna cost them approximately $300 a year at $1.35. So say $260, which is what a fire district will probably cost you. It should be closer to $650 a year. That's what this report's gonna tell us though. that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm just taking the math times the.
Yeah, like I said, yeah, it just
The
depends on
value.
whatever your tax assessed value is, multiply it times 2.8 and divide by 1,000.
And it'll just be something where frankly, we just have to give them something better, and I hope that's even possible.
Yeah, yeah. We do.
Just a question. Your meeting on June 17th, are we able to listen into that?
Yes,
The three
there'll be a
cities?
Zoom link for it.
Will Sarah send that out to us?
Yes, I'll have her send it out to you. So Ray, send digital to eSwag. Send Zoom link, June 17th.
Can I sneak in a general question? Chair?
Yes.
I was curious. So if you saw an initiative on your ballot and it was being proposed by citizens of the city or the city, Monoma County or Metro, which source would you trust more? Or is there any differentiation at all?
Between Multnomah County and Metro?
Monoma County, Metro, or Troutdale?
Oh,
If it's being proposed by one of those three entities, who are you gonna trust more as a citizen of
We all
Troutdale?
instinctively trust our city more than we trust our.
Yeah, but see,
Answer probably none of the above.
but the thing is for district, yeah, we're gonna have to be, I think the 4 cities are gonna have to be in page together and gonna have a common committee and are gonna have to be pushing this as a city for the political side of it. So that even though that it's presented as Multnomah County is simply the tool we're using to get this to you. And it's really coming out of the 4 cities.
Charlotte, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it has to do with maybe how savvy and involved the person, the voter is. Because I could see it going multiple different ways.
Could be a
Definitely,
lot of
yeah.
education.
Yeah, that's what
yeah.
I have been thinking the whole time tonight is, gosh, this is
How do
gonna
you
be.
explain this to every single
Everybody,
person, one at a time, kind of thing?
And I'm still trying to get myself on board because I did the math.
Yeah, and that's why, I did it on,
Right?
yeah, the last champion, I did a little article where I mentioned fire district as a possibility. I'm thinking that not the one that's gonna be out, but the one for the fall, there may be a longer headline article, because we're in the last year of the contracts, I may explain that out, and I may put about the costs. About this problem that we're gonna be facing, because by then we'll have some better feel for what the sheriff's office and what Gresham is gonna be trying to squeezing us for, and the citizens will see this number and let them know that it's well beyond revenues, and we're gonna be cutting into savings and maybe cutting into services, and that this is why we're exploring this option, like every other city in the metro area has to deal with, so,
Oh, we gotta get it out of the general fund.
yeah.
Well, it seems like our demographics are changing a bit and smoothing over time. But it still seems like there's a residual core in Troutdale that feel like Monoma County is like the stepmother that doesn't really like you.
Oh.
And so the trust is not,
Careful, right?
Don't
trust
get me
is
started
not
about
there.
the joint office of homeless services and
Yeah.
what services they provide to East County, there is no services,
yeah.
so, yeah. Anyway. All right, well, maybe that's a suggestion for another meeting is, mid to late July. By then I'll have a lot more information, these other things.
Can everybody look at their calendars?
Yes, sir.
The 22nd,
22nd?
Mondays, yeah, the 22nd of July.
Why do I have Condon on the 22nd?
I don't know. In July? Shouldn't
Oh, wait,
be.
no, it changed, okay. We're available.
I took the day off for some reason, but I didn't articulate it in my plan, so.
We should have Republic coming up in July, not Condon.
It should be
Yeah,
fine,
that's a Monday.
Huh?
should be
Should be fine.
Waiting on Jeffrey, how does the 22nd look? We got
Okay.
thumbs up. Victoria? She's not
That's
gonna vote.
good for me.
Okay.
Okay,
So regardless of what Tanny says, he's outvoted.
there you go.
Okay, 22nd.
Very good.
But Tenny's final.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah.
My right-hand guy right here.
You're my left.
All right, 22nd it is, thank you.
Need my sheet again. 'cause we're gonna
Anything
vote
else
here.
for staff, questions, comments, concerns? Twyla?
Nothing for staff. I think generally in our discussion tonight, what came up for me is, I think a lot of people move to East County because of its affordability. And also I know a lot of people also who are retiring and moving out of state because they just can't afford to stay here any longer. So I just want to, as we move forward, think, kind of keep that in our minds, how we can keep this a place that people can come to live and still be able to afford normal things.
And feel safe. so.
Yeah, yeah.
Karen?
As I bring to city council all the time, is you're gonna tax me out of Troutdale, and I'm really concerned about how much taxing we're gonna be doing, and I would hope and pray that you keep that in mind, that Ray keeps that in mind, and the city keeps that in mind, because we wanna keep people here. That would be my concern. At the same time, I'm kind of excited of maybe change for the better, and not paying an arm and a leg for it. Right, so it'll be next, interesting couple months.
Interesting couple of years.
Yeah, that too.
And
I would agree. I think it's a significant tax increase, probably either way that you look at it. But I think, if we can do something better, I think that's a good selling point, and I question if Gresham is ever going to be something better.
as they look today, I agree. Rich?
Seems like we should be looking at the demographics of our city. I know we do that from time to time, but I haven't looked at it lately. We should consider that. And it's interesting to me to hear what Carol has to say, just because we're far better off than the average person. If she's feeling that way, eek, what are the rest of the people feeling? Can't be pretty out there.
Victoria, any comments?
Oh, a lot of questions were answered for me tonight. Thanks for having them here.
Good. Jeffrey? Jeffrey's all good. I have to say, yeah, great conversation. Praxis gives a lot of information, a lot of stuff to think about. And taking our next steps, we're just waiting for some more information in July, it sounds like. And hopefully take some next steps forward and get a better feel from Gresham as far as fire goes. I hope things go well with Multnomah County, but as always, we need to make sure we get more bids and keep our upper hand there too, so. Ray, anything else for the group?
No, that's all I have.
Okay.
Just a lot more information coming in the next 6 weeks.
With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
I second it.
Okay, motion to adjourn, second on the floor by Carol. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.